Welcome to Sausage on a Fork, a podcast dedicated to the UK's longest running children's drama programme, Grange Hill. My name's Neil, and in each episode I'll interview a former cast member about their life before, during and after their time on the programme. Okay, welcome to the latest episode of Sausage on the Fork. This is the Christmas special, and I am absolutely delighted to say that I have been joined for this episode by none other than John Drummond, who played Trevor Cleaver. John, welcome to Sausage on a Fork.
Hello, Neil. Finally we get to meet. Yeah,
Yeah, brilliant. Now, I just got to say that this is a first for Sausage on a Fork, because this is the first time I've actually had a full face-to-face interview for an episode, and it's also a first because I'm coming to you from another Grange Hill member's house, and we are in the front room of George Wilson's house. George, who played Ziggy Greaves, and it is the Christmas special, and I've got to say, it's like Santa's grotto in here. You can't move for Christmas decorations. They're all over the place. I'm sure George will be joining in with us at some point. But anyway, let's crack on, John, and we'll start the way we start every episode. And if you can tell us how you first got into acting.
well, I used to do school plays and things like that at junior school when I was younger, in primary school and infant school as well. And I suppose it's like a lot of people who get into acting at a young age. You're interested in it at school. You like doing it. You like performing. You're a bit of a show off. We're all sort of show offs, really. And so my dad tried to get me into believe it or not, child modelling. I was at child modelling age when I was 7. I know, me as a model. So I joined this agency, and I'd been up for, I had photos taken, and I'd been up for sort of ad campaigns for baked beans and all kinds of stuff, and got me work. And the woman that sort of run the agency, one day she spoke to my dad and she said, "Look, this isn't really what your son wants to be doing and what he should be doing. He wants to perform, So she gave my dad the number of the Scher Theatre in London. She said, "I know Anna. If you call her and get him on the waiting list, and they do drama classes there, and he'll be able to do what he wants to do, which is obviously perform." So my dad did, and he got my name down on the waiting list. I waited, I think it was about, 9 months, 9 months. It was quite a time. And then I joined the Scher Theatre, and I went in. I remember my first class I went into, they were doing all kinds of things. That they were doing a lot of movement stuff. We were doing a lot of marching around the hall, sort of the space. And then people were doing monologues and duologues, so people were standing up and doing these improvisations, and it was a block with it looked like a shot dummy head on the block, and they were having these, and I just sat there and thought, what is this place? It was way beyond what I sort of imagined. Yeah. But I kept going, and I loved it, and I kept going to classes there over the years while I was working on Grange Hill. When I finished on Grange Hill, into my 20s, and I left the theatre. I think I was in my early 30s when I eventually stopped going to classes, and that's when I stopped acting.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if we just go back to when you went to Scher's, then was there anyone else there who we might know?
Yeah. So I was in class with. So John Holmes was at the time, John Shannon, John Alford, Tina Mann was at Anna's, and then there was the older. So I remember when I was first there. So I must have been around 10 or 11. My mum actually worked at the theatre. They had this little sort of little not coffee bar downstairs, like coffee bar tuck shop that the kids used to go to. My mum used to work there for a couple of hours in the evening, and so when I used to finish my class, which was in the early afternoon, so after school, so we used to go to classes after school, And then I'd have to wait for my mum, and then I'd go upstairs, and I was able to watch the first sort of half an hour sometimes of the adult classes. So I saw people like Kathy Burke, for instance, when she was about 15, 16. I saw her in classes, and obviously Sue Tully was at Anna's, and loads of people. Ray Burdis, who went on to become a really good filmmaker and actor. So Ray was there. So there was a lot of older actors that were in Grange Hill as well that were there. So it was like a lot of people that were in Grange Hill came through that theatre.
Because I remember it must have been when you were in Grange Hill, because I recognised it. But there was there like a kids' TV programme or like some sort of documentary made about Anna Scher's? I don't know if it was like a school's programme or something.
Yes.
But I remember seeing you in that and thinking you were a lot younger than when you were in Grange Hill.
So there was someone came in and did like you said, I think did a documentary, and they came in and they basically filmed a class and some of the stuff we did in the class, and John Holmes is also in that documentary as well. So that I think I would have been about 9 or 10.
Right. Yeah.
I think that was in black and white as well. I think they might have done it in black and white.
Just remember you're all with your Anna Scher t-shirts on.
T-shirts, and the theatre space itself, it was in an old building, which was an old sort of church, not like an old church, but like these modern buildings that people use for churches, and it was this lovely, great big space. And so they set it up. We all had these Anna Scher t-shirts.
Yeah.
I mean, we didn't, when we went to class, we didn't wear t-shirts with Anna Scher. We went, because we used to go after school, so we would just go where we were wearing on the day. But I think they just they staged it a little bit. Yeah. But you just reminded me of that. So I thought I did that, John. I think there might have been one or two of the older actors as well. I can't remember. Yeah. But that would have been about 1981, something like that. Yeah. God, such a time ago. Wow.
So, and did you get much acting work before Grange Hill then?
When I went to the theatre and I started doing classes, for about 2 years I didn't get a job.
Right.
And not that I was expecting, but there were other people in. So there were, kids as young as 9 and 10 that were working, were getting jobs. But I'd been for quite a few auditions and not got a job. And then the first job I got, I think I was 10 or about 10, I think. And it was a BBC drama series called Love Story, and it was there were like 4 or 5 different separate stories, like 2-hour films, and this one was called Love Story, Mr. Right, and it was with the actress Caroline Pickles.
All right.
And if anyone's listening, if you Google her, she's done a huge amount of work.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and my part in this was, the scene was a police car turned up at this house, and 2 policemen came out, and they took this man from the house and led him out to the car. I think the story was he was a bigamist, I think,
right.
And he come to get arrested right at the end of the sort of the drama, and I just rode by on a bicycle, stopped in the distance and looked back, and that was it. And I had to wear, the bike I had was this 1950s sort of butcher's boy bike, and cage thing on the front, and I had to have my hair done in a short back and sides, and I had these 1950s balaclavas. That was my first job. Yeah, I remember that.
Brilliant.
So I did that, and then I did a few other things. I did a radio play in Manchester with Kathy Burke and Kathy Staff, who played Nora Betty.
Oh yeah.
So I remember going up to Manchester and staying in a hotel in Piccadilly. This was before it was rebuilt. Yeah. So it was the old Piccadilly, I think it was Piccadilly Square in Manchester. And I'm trying to think, there were other jobs as well that I can't remember now because it's so far back.
Because before you were Trevor Cleaver, you were someone else in Grange Hill as well.
Yeah. I think, I'm not sure if this has happened a lot. I'm sure it may well have done, but I've been in Grange Hill twice. So I was in Grange Hill as another character.
Yeah.
A couple of years before. So it was an episode where it was it may have been the first or second series of Zammo.
Yeah.
and Jonah's age group, and there was an episode where they got blazers from another school. It was Brookdale or
Rodney Bennett. It was
Rodney Bennett. That was it. Rodney Bennett. Rodney Bennett school, and they then sort of they spent the day in the school going into classes. And they got these, and there was another character who they were friendly with, called, I can't remember his name.
That was it. That was Jeremy. That was Jonah's cousin.
Yeah, Jonah. Yeah. So Jeremy, you know more than me. You've done your research, and he had two friends. And my character's name, I think, was Barry.
Yeah, that's right.
So I was in about 3 or 4 scenes. What I remember about that, actually, which is, I'm surprised I actually got back into Grange Hill a year and a half later, because when we were filming that episode, I think it was one episode, I said it was about 4 or 5 scenes. There was a scene where we're all, if you ever find it, there's a scene we're all sat in a fish and chip shop.
Yeah.
Sitting around eating chips, talking, and they're planning how they're going to get into school. Now, what I remember about that day is that when we were filming that scene, we all started getting the giggles.
Right.
We all started corpsing and laughing, and we couldn't stop. So it was me, then it was Lee, then it was someone else. And I remember the director was Luke. It was a woman director. She was loose. She was going nuts because we just couldn't get it. And if you actually watch the scene as it was put out, you see these camera shots where they're moving away from sort of the side on one character to focus on another character, and you can see people's mouths. You can see our mouths sort of starting to go up into a smile. They couldn't. They tried all they could to edit it.
Yeah.
Because they didn't have a single take that they produced, and so they had to cut it together. But you can see as the camera moves away in certain shots, you can see the corner of people's mouths going up, and you can see them laughing. It was terrible. It was the worst. I mean, I had some moments on Grange Hill. I mean, scenes that me and George did together.
Yeah, I'm going to speak about one of them later on.
we did a bit of corpsing, but that was the worst experience because we were all young lads, you know. I think I must have been about 11 or 12 then.
Right.
And so I did Grange Hill then, and then a year and a half later, I came back.
The thing about that storyline, I always remember watching it and thinking, that's stupid. Why would 2 lads from one school be wanting to go into another school? And then when I was in high school, a lad done it. He was from another school, and he came and spent a week in our school, and he only got caught because one of the teachers was realising and said, "Is that new boy in your class?" And one of the lads went, "Oh yeah, he was sat next to me and such," and then that's the only way he got collared.
Yeah.
But yeah, it just seemed like a stupid thing, but it does actually happen.
I think a lot of the storylines in Grange Hill come from people hearing real stories about it happen. I remember when I was a teenager, I'm sure I heard a story of one kid going to another school. I think it was like a sort of thing.
Yeah,
people did at the time.
Definitely. And I know one lad just used to turn up whenever we had PE. He'd bunk off from his own school and just come and play football with us for an hour and then disappear. So then, as you say, a year and a half later, you end up going as Trevor Cleaver. And were you a fan of Grange Hill?
Yeah, everybody was at the time. Everybody knew Grange Hill. Everybody watched it. And Ben Ray, who was the producer on the series, he came to. So people would come to at the Scher Theatre. There was a space that you rehearsed with your class in, but it had audience seating. So casting, it was great. So casting directors would come, and they would come to the classes and sit at the back and watch the classes, and that's how a lot of the castings were at Scher. And Ben Ray, who was producer, and someone else, it may be one of the directors, I can't remember, came and watched the class, and they were auditioning, and I was actually originally auditioning for Gonch.
Oh, right.
So there was me and John Holmes and 1 or 2 other boys from Anna's who were auditioning. But John obviously got the part, and I can't imagine anybody playing. I can't imagine me playing Gonch. John was perfect, but the producer and the director liked me.
Right.
And the producer said to Anna, she said, "We've got a character. We've got this character that we're sort of thinking of writing in. We don't know if it's going to be for a lot of episodes or a few episodes, but he's kind of like a bully character. We think John might be good for this character, but he's not a nasty bully character. He's more like a comical. You know, because they wanted, I think, a foil for Gonch, and so they were writing that character. So I was very fortunate
Yeah.
that I got cast as Trevor, and I hadn't really sort of finished it by that point.
Right.
So I was very lucky. But originally I auditioned for Gunch.
Yeah. But like that, because like that first episode, I think you get the first episode you were in as Trevor, you get sort of a proper feel for what Trevor's like, because he does like throwing his weight around, but at the same time he's a massive wimp. At the same time,
he's a classic sort of bully. So in that first episode, he's full on.
Yeah.
He's throwing his weight around. He wants to establish himself and wants to make sure everyone's frightened of him.
Yeah.
But actually, he's not very bright.
No.
So there's this whole theme that runs through Grange Hill for his character, is that he's always getting tricked by the characters, you know, in these ridiculous schemes.
Yeah.
You know, like telling him there's a ghost in the school and all kinds of nonsense like that, and he believes it. He goes along with it. And I think there was one scene in the first or second series where Trevor and Vince are sort of stood on the steps outside the school, and they're watching Gunch and Hollow, and they're doing something, and they're sort of watching it, and Trev says something to Vince like, "Where do they get these ideas from? How do they get away with this?" And Vince goes, "You best not to know, Trev." And that, I think, sums up those two characters, because everything's going on around them and they just can't work out what's going on. It's all over their head. So in the first sort of series, he was quite aggressive, Trevor. But as the series and each series progressed, he became less bully and sort of more comedy character.
I mean, the first episode as well, there's like a bit where Trevor actually technically breaks the fourth wall, because Hollow comes in on his bike and rides into him, and you see Trevor having a go, but the camera's like properly on his face, and I just think that's unusual for Grange Hill to do something like that.
I remember that scene because I was obviously quite small, and I've got no hair now. It's going, but I used to have a lot of hair. It was almost like a ginger afro when I was, it was massive. And I had this great big mass of hair, and I remember the camera was where the bike was, and in the scene I sort of walked around the bike, sort of appraising the bike, you know, what you should have, and there's a bit where I say, "I'll watch your mouth, I'll drag you over," and the camera was where Bradley was, and so I'm right in the camera, so they went really close up to me. So it was, and there's some stills somewhere. I've seen some still photos where they would take pictures on the set. There's some still photos of me right in the camera, with my finger, you know. I think, God, that must have been awful for kids watching that at home.
and like I say, you know, we find out the fact that he was a bit of a wimp in that, because there was the bit with the snake as well, like, and so obviously it was an actual snake, like, but were you really genuinely scared of it, or was there any apprehension, like?
Well, I don't mind. I mean, I don't mind snakes. I know some people have got a real sort of. It's like spiders. There are people that are terrified of spiders, and they don't bother me. Yeah. But I can understand why. Yeah. Because they move so quick, and they've got all these legs, and it must throw people a bit. But no, snakes generally, unless they're poisonous. If I saw one, I wouldn't necessarily go over. And,
you wouldn't be picking it up and
go over and pick it up and stroke it. But there are people that see things like that and they run, don't they?
Yeah.
I tell you what, I am frightened of. what does get me like that is wasps.
Oh, right, okay, yeah.
I had a very bad experience as a child. I tell you, I got stung twice in the space of about 5 minutes. I was quite unwell. So even now, as a big grown man, if I'm around wasps, I freeze or I have to get away. Yeah. It's just, it's weird how these things can happen.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, yeah.
It stays with you your whole life, but yeah, so that's an exclusive.
So Percy the snake was alright, but if there'd been a wasp there, it'd been different.
If there'd been a wasp nest, I wouldn't have been.
No, there was another one. I need to talk about this. There was a cookery lesson where Ronnie Beatles had coloured their hair, so Trevor flew through flour over it to try and tone it down. Can you remember how Ronnie got her own back on Trevor?
I can't. I can remember. Now you've said that scene. See, you'll bring it back. No, I can't. No, what did
she do? Cracked an egg.
Oh, yeah, she egged me, didn't she?
Yeah.
So there, if you watch that scene, the egg disappears because there's just this mound of ginger hair that the egg disappears into.
And I'm assuming that was only done in one take.
I think so, maybe. We may well have done 2 or 3, perhaps. I mean, at the time, I always wonder with the directors sometimes if they deliberately did things 2 or 3 times, because we must have got on their nerves sometimes.
I mean, hopefully it was to show that, you know, bullies do get their comeuppance at the same time as well. Like, because Trevor was mates with Vince, as you've mentioned, but there was a bit where Gonchard hung Trevor's bag up on the wall, and you see them there. You see Vince trying to get it down, not Trevor. Trevor's obviously said to Vince, "Go ahead, you're the one going to get that down for me." Like, and as this is our Christmas special, we'll talk about the Grange Hill Christmas special that you were in, which was the 1985 one. Can you remember who Trevor was in league with in that episode? There was a buzzer game, you know, where you've got one of them like metal wires, and it was like in the shape of Great Britain, and you've got to like get like the buzzer, like a loop around it, and if it touches it makes a buzzer.
I remember that, yeah. So it was. See, I can't even remember the Christmas episode.
It was weird because the person he was in league with, I don't think he ever had any other dialogue with him in any other episodes ever.
Wow. No.
So it was Banksy, Tim Polly.
Oh. I was coming back to it now, yeah.
He switches the
buzzer off, yeah.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, he remembers, and George remembers. He wasn't even there.
I told you, it's in my brain somewhere. Yeah. It's like locked away. It's like somewhere in the back of my.
They came up with this scheme that when Banksy was having a go, Trevor would be like the one man on the stall to turn it off, and so that they'd split the winnings. But there was all sorts of a commotion, and as they everyone realised Banksy was sat there and the metal was touching the wire and no noise was being made. Like, so he ran off like. And we move on to your second year, and one of the greatest characters ever joined in your second year. George is looking at me now. I'll have to say Ziggy and not Imelda. So,
yeah, standards certainly dropped.
So yeah, obviously a few characters joined that year, like Ziggy joined and Imelda, and Trevor didn't really like Ziggy to begin with. I think just because he was Scouse, they all just. I think
it would be, again. I think it'd be like that in any normal school. The new kid turned up from a different city with a different accent, you know, and he wasn't a brash character, but he was quite a confident character, and he was coming around with his Liverpool bag, and you know, it was never really said, but John's character, Robbie, was an Arsenal supporter, and we were both Arsenal supporters anyway. So there was sort of that sort of thing going on. And it was also probably like that for George when he first. So I remember when George the first day, I think we used to get a coach. He used to pick us up from the Angel, and then it would drive across to West London, and there'd be a pickup point by Sylvia Young School. And I remember you got on the coaching the first time. He came on, and we sort of like, it's the first time we met him, so we all sort of came on the coach and came and sat next to him, had a chat, and how you doing, and so it was all a bit like it is for most kids. So you're a bit sort of cautious at first because you don't know someone, and then of course then they start talking and they got a strange voice. And probably to George, he's surrounded by all these Cockneys. He's not used to these sort of London voices. So no, Trev didn't get on with anybody to start with. Any new character, he didn't get on with them. But then eventually there was like a sort of it's like an unwritten truce. So even though Trev was never really best mates with Ziggy or best mates with Gonch, occasionally they would.
There was a definite love-hate relationship between the two, wasn't there? Like
they cooperate here and there, wasn't it?
There'd be the occasional cooperation, but but there was. I think Trev really, he had lots of friends, but not close friends. I think with how I would describe it.
And you've mentioned the coming in with the Liverpool bag, and Trevor and Vince put it on that statue outside, but it wasn't actually Ziggy's bag. It was Aunt Jones's.
Oh yeah.
And they spent the rest of the episode like looking over the shoulder, looking out for him. Then
quite often Trevor did a lot of things that went wrong.
And then there was a PE lesson where Ziggy said he'd joined the swimming team, and he beat any of the other lads at the crawl, to which Trevor said, he looks like a proper crawler, because as I say, they weren't happy. And then in that lesson, someone nicked Ziggy's tie in the changing room, and when Ziggy asked where his tie was, it was Trevor that said, "You what?" And then the famous chant of "You what, you what, you what" came out. They were all chanting that at him, like.
Yeah, I got that for a good few years after that as well. You know, people.
Do you know I don't remember it.
Yeah, I go in the shower and the showers get turned on and I get soaked.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah.
These are all shouting it.
Yeah, and so they're all just chanting it again and again.
Yeah.
Trevor did like to give people a hard time, as we've said. But when Robbie Wright got an earring and the lads were all giving him grief, it was Trevor who was like on Robbie's side, like, you know, don't be worrying about it, don't let what other people think.
Oh, right.
And it was nice to see that side of him. Do you know what I mean? Cause
I think the writers, the writers that wrote for the show, I think they were very clever. I think sometimes, so you get a lot of stuff going on where characters would be how they were, but every now and then I think they would write something where you would get a bit of an insight into a character beyond the facade of the character. So you'd see a little bit of maybe what the character was really thinking about stuff, or how they were really feeling about things. And I think there were little scenes like that. Not many for Trevor, I have to say, but there were little times. There were one or two scenes where you could watch it and think, you've sort of seen a little bit more about what's going on inside.
And one of the famous things in Grange Hill was Goncha's Toast Bar. And Trevor and Vince were like trying to having a discussion about how they could muscle in on it. So they went over and said it'd be a shame if the caretaker found out about this, and everyone rounded on them. You're not going to tell anyone about this. Like,
see, that was another example of Trevor thinking, well, I've got a plan, we're going to muscle in, we're going to go and get a piece of the action, and it then goes horribly wrong because he finds out the whole playground, because everyone wants to go to the toast bar and they don't want him messing it up. So but that again, that was Cleaver throughout the whole of the series. Whenever he tried to do something, it invariably went wrong.
And we saw Trevor as a sort of an occasional smoker around then as well. Were you a smoker at the time?
I did smoke a bit when I was probably a late teenager, and then for a time in my late teens, early 20s. But
so was it easy then, like filming it, like if you were?
I don't know. I can't remember if I was smoking at the time when we did that episode. I can't remember. I may not have been like a smoker myself at the time. I can't remember how they shot that, because I'm not sure. I'm not sure how they would do that.
So they were in like a shed, and I think I think it was possibly Gonch and Hollow were hiding from Imelda or someone, and they ran into this shed to hide, and there was a few lads in there. Like,
I think, John, you weren't allowed to pull on the cigarette, were you? You'd just be.
Oh, you have it in your hand, probably,
You know.
Yeah, probably just stand around. I suppose the idea was that it just to give the impression that you were smoking.
Yeah.
But because I don't know what they would do, because there was a period where you couldn't show people smoking and things like that. So
in them days, you could hold it. There's loads of scenes of people holding them, but you just couldn't pull on it.
Yeah, and that was, of course, the year of Just Say No. And again, Trevor's Nice Side come out when there was all sorts of rumours flying around about when Zammo had been arrested, and it was Trevor who was like, well, you shouldn't believe everything everything you hear, and the fact that he's like the lad's in hospital now and he's getting treatments and all that. And again, that was a nice side to say. Again. Sensitive Trev. But we need to talk about Just Say No, because you're in the video and you're in the chorus, like the ensemble singing, but on the album you sing on a couple of songs on the album, and so you sung. I know you were there for making the video for George's one. The teacher, but you got your own solo song on that as well.
The album, I can't get a copy of it anywhere, because I keep trying to find a copy, because I want to get a copy of the song the track that I sung.
What was the song you sung?
It was called No Supervision at Break. So the album itself, there was two. So that you had side A or side one was like a lot of sort of well-known tracks, and there was like a medley, a soul medley and things in there, and everyone was sort of like ensemble singing. And then in side two were songs that were written by Phil Redman. So Phil Redman wrote this song, which was at the time there was a lot of industrial action being taken by teachers. They were striking. There was a lot of stuff going on. So Phil Redman wrote this song, sort of slightly political song.
Yeah,
I think I was about 14, and they asked me to sing it, and it was a very sort of quick up tempo, almost like a sort of not punky but rocky, poppy. Yeah, it was. I remember that. Yeah, I remember the Just Say No because I was in the video, but I actually didn't. I wasn't on the recording of the song.
Ah, right, okay.
Because they did it over 2 weeks, and the first week when they recorded the song in the studio, I was on holiday.
Right.
So I only came back and I was only in the video. I remember the video, you know, terrible video of us running down the stairs,
lifting
people up, and then there was bits of us in this, and then the disco bit dancing and singing it. Oh god, it was awful. But it was at the time, it was a big thing.
It was massive, yeah.
And the album, so the album was recorded, or the bits that I recorded was in a little studio in Maida Vale in London. I remember that. I remember going to Maida Vale, tiny little recording studio. So I sung that song, and then the video for George's single was filmed up here in a school, wasn't it?
Yeah. In the Holt.
School, yeah. I remember coming up and filming. We were there for the day.
Yeah.
And that video, it's impossible to find. I found a snippet of it, but the actual whole video of the teacher is just, it's impossible to find. I found a snippet of it from like a news report that I think John Holmes and Simone Hyams were on, but that's it. That's the only one. So whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know.
Not a bad thing.
So on the Just Say No thing as well, I know there was a bit of contention about when people were going to the White House and who was picked and who wasn't. But did you know anything about that? Like,
no, I don't remember how they selected the people, who they selected, why they selected them. I don't even know if I was ever in contention to go. It would have been a nice thing. I do. Part of me thinks they might have been a bit concerned at taking me, George, and some of the other kids, because they might have thought we might have been a little bit naughty or misbehaved. But no, we never went. But I don't remember being bothered by it at the time.
I remember I was pissed off.
Yeah.
That I weren't going. I'm sure you were. We were both. You and John were saying it would have been nice to have gone.
Yeah, it would have been nice. I don't really remember. I think I'd remember if I was really annoyed about it, but I don't think I was. And I think for those people that went, good for them. It was a great experience. But I mean, I'd always wanted to go to America, and I finally did go. I went to New York last year, so I eventually got there sort of 40 or 35 years later.
Okay, so that moves us on then to your third year in Series 10, and Trevor comes in very, very different in this year, because Gonch wasn't there. Trevor said he was going to be the top dog. Basically wants to be a cock of the school, basically, and he had new mates and struck a deal with Imelda that they wouldn't get in each other's way, and he started picking on Vince a lot more than he ever had done before, and it was never said why he started doing that to Vince. He just started doing it.
I think again, that's why Grange Hill was so well liked, because it was very realistic. Because I think that's what happens. I think,
it's an easy target.
But also, friendships. You can go to school. Anybody that's been to any sort of comprehensive secondary school, or any school really, that you start in the first year and you'll have someone that you're friends with for a couple of years, and then you get a bit older and you meet new friends, and then you sort of someone you were really close with, you don't really sort of spend much time with anymore. And I think that sort of happened. And I think also Vince, like you said, he was a bit of an easy target. I think that was probably the time where Trev was at his most, not nasty, but where he was quite horrible. Quite horrible to Vince.
Yeah.
But again, I think that was because, like most people that are in that sort of situation, most bullies, they're underneath, they're probably just as frightened and just as insecure as everybody else.
Yeah.
But yeah, and the stuff with Imelda, I mean, I thought Fleur and her gang were great.
Yeah.
Fleur was great. Brilliant. And I loved the stuff between Imelda and Ziggy as well, I thought was brilliant.
Yeah, well, there's a bit where Imelda takes a tie from Ziggy and she sprays it with that hairspray that she had. And Trevor's laughing his head off about it until Ziggy said, I don't know what you're laughing for. Sure. This is your tie. So Trevor then borrowed Vince's tie, but then told me he was never going to give him it back. And there's a bit. Do you remember when Ziggy was doing the pools? And
yeah, you do. When I was doing off Arsenal v Liverpool.
Yeah.
No problem there.
Yeah. I remember. Yeah.
So
the thing is, the thing with his character and Gonch is that every episode they were doing something.
Yeah.
Every episode there was a scam. So you're trying to remember all these scams. It was like I think if I sat here and just tried to invent the most ridiculous scam, they probably did it.
Yeah. And that year was when Aaron Bell was there as Mr. Scott, the form tutor, and he got a terrible time from Trevor, didn't he? And there's always a cracking bit, and I'd thought about this till I was looking through, where Trevor gave him a note to try and get out of class, and the note said, Can Trevor go home early so he can take his gran to the cinema?
That's a classic, that. That was a classic.
And he might have got away with it if he hadn't spelled cinema with an S.
Yeah. But that's classic Trevor, isn't it?
Yeah. And then does the barge trip.
Coventry.
Yeah, Grange Hill fans love the barge trip, and you must have had an absolute ball away doing that.
It was great. Yeah, we went up. We were filming up near Coventry. I think we were staying in. I think they were sort of like the halls of residence, University of Warwick or somewhere, wasn't it? I think.
Students' residence.
Yeah. But yeah, we had a great time, and then I remember those episodes. Well, that was the storyline. We were camping out.
Yeah.
I remember filming them. So it's weird. You watch that now, and you watch us sitting in that tent, and we're all like terrified, and all these noises. That was in a studio.
Yeah.
It was a tent set up in a studio, and we're inside a studio doing that, you know. And but yeah, I remember that, and we had a great time. We went up to. So I think I was probably about 15. And Georgie would have been a bit older, wouldn't you?
That's just 16, I think.
Yeah. So we went to we stayed at this halls of residence, and we had.
So did you see Tim Polly climbing up the outside of the halls of residence and falling off because he was trying to get into one of the, because he'd come back after curfew, basically?
I do remember that. I think there was a few of us that were out.
I can't remember it. I know he's talked about it, but I can't remember it.
I remember, I think he was trying to get in. I think it was like the second floor window. Yeah, I think he did. I do remember that. I don't know if I would remember seeing it or remember it at the time, but right. I do remember the Tim trying to do his Spider-Man impression. Because we'd all. I mean, look, we were all teenagers, so we apart from the fact that we were acting in this show, we were also teenagers growing up, so we were trying to do all the sort of stuff that teenagers do, and I think there's a couple of times we were out a bit later than we should.
Yeah.
But nothing really bad, you know.
Yeah.
Nothing too sort of.
Nothing that made the papers.
No, nothing, and nothing that would have made the papers. It would have been anything. It would have been nothing, you know. I think I do remember that. I think I do remember Tim.
Yeah.
You sort of sparked a memory.
Yeah. So round then, Imelda had been expelled, and Trevor and Vince were kind of on speaking terms. But this is when the lads had the secret den under the school, and Trevor wants to know where it was, but they weren't going to tell him. And he eventually did find out and trashed it. And Vince went for him in the canteen, and that's one thing I'll always say about Vince. Even though he did become a much more wimp and easy target, there was a few times where he went for Trevor on his own, even when Trevor was with his mates. And
well, the thing is, whenever that happened, when Trev was being Trev, if someone stood up to him, Trev would always he'd always back off and be a little bit frightened by it, you know. So
however, this time he pushed Vince's face into a bowl of semolina.
Yeah, it didn't work for Vince, unfortunately.
No. And then there was the bit where we said about Mr. Scott and Trevor not liking him, and he was an easy target as well because he didn't have any control over the class. So there was the bit where there was the tutorial. He said, because they're having tutorials and the kids had decided that, or he decided that the kids could run the tutorial, and Trevor used it as a chance to just take the mickey out of Mr. Scott, and he thought he was being dead funny. And this was the first time Mr. Scott grabbed hold of him, but then walked away. And Trevor was like, I won, didn't I? And no one thought any more of Trevor for what had happened. Everyone sort of just looked at him and walked out. And that then led to a science lesson where Mr. Scott was dissecting a heart.
I can't remember.
Don't know if you remember that. And Trevor ended up throwing up in the class. He wants to get his revenge on Mr. Scott for that. Can you remember how we got his revenge and how we got the other lads to help him?
The stuff I remember, so this is what's coming back to me now. The stuff I remember with Mr. Scott. I remember the scene where Aaron walks up to me and grabs me.
Yeah, so that was that one, yeah.
What we hum.
Yeah, and that's what we were doing something. We were making a noise.
Or humming, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's when Mr. Scott has his slow march towards Trevor, because he was saying to Trevor, you need to get him to stop. And he was like, well, I'm not going to. So he goes to run out, and Trevor shouts, yeah, go and get your boyfriend, Mr. Kennedy. And that's when it all fell silent then, and he walks up.
I remember, is that the bit where Aaron stops at the door and he turns round and just walks, and it's just really menacing. And I remember, because I remember when we were filming it, I was actually, me as a person, it was like, wow, I was really frightened, because he came at me, look in his face, look in his eyes, and he grabs me, doesn't he?
Yeah, up against the wall and goes to hit him. But it was only because Ronnie shouted at him, like saying the noise has stopped. But I have to say, you were talking earlier about when you were in the chippy and everyone was smirking. I've watched that a few times, and it really looks like, because it's from the back of you, it looks like, maybe it was just like a nervous laugh or a nervous smile, but it looks like you've got a massive grin on your face like you're sitting down.
I can interject again. So I was putting him off.
Right.
I was sitting in front of him, and I constantly used to turn to him and do faces or something.
Yeah, that was a common theme, wasn't it, throughout your time in the show, wasn't it? So whenever we were doing scenes and someone didn't have much dialogue and was in the scene, someone would sort of turn around and make a face or try and put someone off. But I remember that scene actually. I do remember that scene when he goes to grab me. He was a nice guy, Aaron. Actually, I haven't seen him for a long time. I said I heard a little bit of the podcast with him, but he was a lovely guy, Aaron.
I speak with him. He's he's top man. Yeah. He loves his memories of the show. Like even though it was only a year. Yeah. He was in every episode as well. He had a big impact in that year, didn't he?
Yeah, he had a huge impact, I think.
Definitely.
And I think again, why the show was so popular and was so good, because the writing was so good. The writing on that show was brilliant, and I think that they sort of capture that sense of these sort of new young teachers coming into comprehensive education and dealing with these kids. I mean, it must be, I can't imagine even now what it must be like to be a teacher in a secondary school. It must be really. I
did it as a teaching assistant in a secondary school for 6 or 7 weeks, and I was so happy when they said I didn't have to go back, because I was working with 40s. And you know me, I'm less than 5'6". Virtually every kid in that class was taller than me. But were you aware that there was a copycat trend of the humming? Because whenever that clip appears on social media or anything, people always say, "Oh yeah, we did that the next day in our class. We did that." So you know when they're going about kids copying what they saw in Grange Hill, it probably genuinely happened with that one, because it was such an easy thing to do.
Can you imagine it? Can you imagine it's horrific. Next day, teachers going into school and having their kids all sitting there humming and making noises like that. Oh my God.
And now the lads only agreed to help Trevor with that if Trevor agreed to help them look for the Grange Hill ghost. Oh, yeah. But they must have been a laugh because it was all here. I mean, they must have been a laugh to film as well.
Every day was fun.
Yeah.
On that show. Even the long days, because you work with people that you're friends with off set, obviously, and some of the storylines were great fun. I mean, ridiculous, there's a ghost in the school and
using hoovers.
Yeah, I remember I've seen clips of that, and I just look at me doing my terrible overacting.
It's when you run off,
running all my scared faces and think, oh my god.
It's running out into the arms of Mr. Scott.
It's all like exaggerated, isn't it? And stupid.
Yeah.
That's how we played it. So it was funny to watch.
Yeah, it was played a little bit tongue in cheek, but you know, there was a little bit of sort of overacting and bad acting in there as well, to be honest.
Moving on again then, in the fourth year, it started with Trevor. Trevor was directing the first years the wrong way, classic Grange Hill thing. And Vince is looking at him all confused, and then Vince goes, I've got it, and Trevor says, well, I hope it's not catching. But we're sitting in the house of the king of the ad-lib. Were you ever allowed to ad-lib your own lines? Because I know George used to rehearse his lines perfect, but then he'd just start throwing things in and changing.
Let me tell you the truth about George. About George and his lines. George very rarely knew his lines. He'd have an essence of his lines. I think what we did is we actually stayed very true to the script, because you couldn't just go off and just invent loads of different stuff, because it wouldn't make any sense. But what the directors were very good at was we got a little bit of license just to sort of add little bits in. So what George's thing throughout the whole show, if you watch George over the years, George's little thing was, wherever he could in a scene, if he was talking to another character, maybe like someone who was one of the extras or supporting artists in the background, he'd always call them a name, but he'd always use the names of his real friends in Liverpool. Right. So, he's got an old friend, is it Steve? It's Fozzie, is it Stephen?
Fozzie, say.
Yeah, Fozzie, yeah. So there'd be some character someone would be called Fozzie, someone would be called this person, that person. It was George always interjecting his mates' names in the show. And so there would be things like that. And then any little sort of silly private joke that was going on between us at the time, whatever nonsense it was, we would occasionally add a little something in at the end of a line or at the beginning of the line. So we got a little bit of license, but the directors were good. But you couldn't just sort of go in and can rework a line, because sometimes, the way the script was structured, you couldn't do that. So we were able to sort of add little bits in, but the main sort of meat of the script had to stay the same. But I think the directors they were clever, because they knew that part of our characters. So I think the way that they would write, the writers would write it, is they would. I think they used to observe us off set. Yeah. And so they would look at, and I think they used to write things that were kind of that they thought would suit us because of the characters that we really were. Yeah. And I think there was a little bit of that as well. Yeah. So we were able to get away with it.
I think I said in my little podcast with Neil as well, is a lot of the classic ad-libs that you done, and I think myself, because we would have done it the most. Come on, out of everyone, I think in our early era, it was me and you on it. And the others all tended to copy, but we done them at the end of the scene mainly. So if we did do it, it was like the directors used to think, it took my arse doing it all day. So you just let it go.
Well, it was very subtle, wasn't it? It was
subtle, but I'd watch it back and laugh, and you'd watch it back and laugh if I'd done it and go, look what you've done here, and I'd say, John, look, how'd you get away with that one? Do you know?
So quite often as well, you would say there would be scenes where something would be going on, and you'd be in a scene, and you wouldn't be speaking, you wouldn't have any dialogue, and you'd be to the side or in the background, and someone. So I can watch scenes, and I could see George in the background doing something, pulling a little face or doing something that's so subtle. Yeah. That I would see him doing it, and I would know what he'd be referring to. So we did sort of play around with it, but the directors, I said, were very good. I think for them is, did it add something to the scene? Did it add to the energy of the scene? Did it, give it? And so I think anything that they didn't like or they didn't think was, they would just say no. They would stop you, or they would, because you can always edit it out.
And I think they knew as well, kids do spontaneous things and say and spontaneous faces.
People do pull faces at each other and say things. Yeah, of course they do.
Yeah, let it go. Let it go. Just let it go.
It wasn't. It sounds like it was all happening all the time, but it didn't. It was just like little bits here and there. But it was funny.
But there's a bit as well where Trevor was bunking off school and got nicked by the education welfare officer.
You ad-libbed the whole line to him, because that was never in the script. Excuse me, do I know you? You used to say that at the time. Because we were on a tube once, me and John, we were coming back or going to work, I can't remember. And I said to John, we were sitting there for about 10-15 minutes without speaking for whatever reason.
And the tube, it filled up.
Yeah.
So, but basically, when we got on the tube, there was maybe, I don't know, in the carriage, there was maybe 4 or 5 people. And we were sat there. Back then, we used to. Do you remember headphones? Wires and
the Walkman, yeah.
So the Walkman. So we were all we were probably sitting there listening to music, and then over a period of 10-15 minutes, the carriage would have filled up. And then at some point, Jules leant forward, tapped me, and he went, "Are we getting off? Is we getting off at this stop? Or are we getting off the next one?" And I just sort of took my headphones and went, "Sorry, excuse me." No, he said, "No, don't muck about. Are we getting off?" And I went, "Do I know you?" And I just got up and walked up to the other end of the carriage.
Leave me alone, leave me alone.
Leave me alone. And everyone started looking at George. And then he got up and followed me. He went, no, Drummond, we're getting off here. And I went, "Leave me alone, you mad person." And I walked up to him.
And that's why. So you threw that in.
So that then ended up in the episode. So in that scene, you're right, I think the line was something, when he said, "Excuse me," and I go, "Yeah," but I changed it to, "Do I know you?"
But only me and him would understand that.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You've done that on the tube.
I remember that scene, yeah.
Silly
I'm walking along, eating a Mars bar.
Yeah. But can you remember what name Cleaver gave you when he asked who he was?
Vince,
he said he was Vince Savage. So
because he goes card Vince.
Yeah.
That was a classic line as well, wasn't it?
They get called to Bronson's office, Vince and Trevor, and Vince has got no clue what's happening. But then he said he stopped Vince Savage, but he also said the boy had red hair. And that's when Trevor had a massive smirk on his. Well, you're supposed to have a massive smirk on your face at that point.
Probably.
I mean, I've just mentioned Mr. Bronson there. We need to talk about Michael Scher because, everyone says just like what an amazing fella he was.
He was brilliant. I mean, he was a very, obviously it was sort of a very iconic character.
Yeah.
And we, he had quite a long career, Michael, and obviously he did all the Star Wars films, and he was in the Indiana Jones film as well. He was always playing German.
Yeah.
Not always. He played a lot of sort of German.
He played Hitler a lot of times.
Yeah. Well, he was Hitler in the Indiana Jones
film
when he did the autograph on the book. But I have to say, all of the adult actors, I call them the adult actors, all the teachers. So Michael was great. Stuart, he was fantastic. Karen, Gwyneth, George A. Cooper. We love George A. Cooper. He was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Aaron. I remember the first year. Joan Armour-Trading's brother,
Tony,
yeah, he was great. They were fantastic, and it must have been not difficult for them, but it must have been it was obviously a very good job if you were an actor at the time, and then playing a teacher, and that was a really good job. But they were working on a set with a load of, it must have been hard work sometimes for them, because we weren't always mucking around, but they sort of, I think they kind of over a period of time they got used to the way that it worked and used to who we were, and I think actually by and large I think they probably enjoyed it in the end. I think they enjoyed
I mean, I always say you can tell it's a mark of how good Grange Hill was by the calibre of the adult actors, the people who wanted to be in, and the people who got
fabulous. In Grange Hill, it really was.
No,
it really was.
Trevor wound Vince up into thinking that Helen Kelly fancied him, which then led to Vince getting attacked by Mauler's gang, because Mauler and the Gridiron Boys had turned up at this point, and he ended up getting chained to the bike sheds. Poor Vince. But there was another bit with Mauler's gang where Trevor, Ziggy and the lads were going to jump Mauler and his mates, but Griffiths and Bronson, and they had all their staff watching, and it was filmed like a western. So you saw Trevor and Ziggy and that, you saw their point of view, and then you saw Mauler, and then you saw the staff, but there was like western music going on in the background. No, it all goes off, and everyone starts running around and fighting and pushing and all that. But when I watched it, there's like a big wide shot, and Trevor's just on the side, sort of jumping up and down and pointing at people and not actually getting involved at all.
That was probably deliberate. That's what I'm saying. Whenever something like that happened, you'd notice that Trev wasn't in the thick of it.
Yeah, yeah.
He could talk a good fight.
Yeah.
He could do.
You mentioned she was organ. There was a few bits where like Trevor was weightlifting. Were you into weightlifting at all at that point? No. But there was
if you look at me in the episode until I wasn't.
Series 12 was the next series, and it was probably I think where you probably got like your sort of like your major storyline with the drinking and stuff. And in the first episode, we actually see Trevor walking to school, and he's got a couple of cans. But so did they come to you and say, look, this is what your character's going to be like?
Do you know what? I can't remember. I think they may well have spoke to me about it. But I think no, I don't ever remember any major sort of discussions about it. But there would have been some discussions, obviously, because it was quite a serious sort of thing. But I think again they were very clever. It was kind of because it was Trevor's character, because it was him, and everything he did had a sort of element of slapstick or comedy to it. There was quite a lot of it that was quite comedy. It was like, or it seemed like it wasn't quite serious until it got quite serious.
Yeah.
So I thought they pitched it really well.
It just starts off with, like sort of like Ronnie's party. You know, that's when the first time we see him properly drunken, when they're all singing happy birthday to her, and he's like all over Georgina, but then he falls onto the table and pulls all the food off, and then there's like a bit of a fight and all that. But was it easy acting drunk?
No. and actually I think it's probably one of the hardest things to have to do, and I think if when I look at some of it now, I sort of cringe. But you know, I was a young lad, so I think the only thing I could do was try and just from my own memories, remembering what people were like when they're drunk. I've seen some of it's all right, some of it's not great. I don't think some of the stuff I did wasn't that great, but
you stepped in the jelly, mate, was the famous line.
but again, a lot of this, so you're building up to the sort of bit where he gets lost at sea. A lot of this sort of stuff. And I think this is how it probably happens in life, that, you know, there might be one of the kids in the group who suddenly, you know, people will sort of talk about, oh, he's always having a couple of cans here, a couple of cans there, and nobody really notices until one day something really bad happens, and then people realise just how bad it got.
So speaking of the Isle of Wight then, and that where, you know, you were out at sea, that must have been horrendous to film. Like.
Well, if you look at the episode, you might be able to tell, but I've got the clothes I'm wearing, but underneath it I've got a wetsuit on.
Right.
So I've got a wetsuit on and then all my clothes over the top of it. So it was like I felt a bit like, and I was quite a big lad then, as you I'm sure you remember. So I felt a bit like the Michelin Man. I was like I couldn't hardly move in it. And the one thing I do remember, so when we were going to shoot the scenes with the lifeboat that was coming in to rescue me from the sea. Yeah. So they said, well, we're gonna go out, and we went, I think, about a mile offshore, and we were out by this sort of bit in the sea, and there was like an old fort, like an old gun turret thing that was there from the Second World War. That was a sort of mile offshore, where they had the big guns that were there in case Germany tried to invade. And I remember there was a guy there who was from the National Trust and someone else, because obviously that's a lot of safety people there. And there was a guy that was sort of knew a lot about the Isle of Wight and the sea and everything else. And I just remember saying to him, I said, this might be a strange question, but are there any sharks out here? And he went, not really. He said, but a bit further, this is before we went out, he said, a bit further out, a mile out, he said, you might get the occasional little one. So, all right. And then the next, you know, day or whatever, or a few hours later, we went out to where he'd said, and they said, right, we're going to do this shot, John, we're going to do this wide shot at this, you floating in the sea, and this lifeboat or the dinghy coming in from off the shot, sort of coming in to rescue you. So what we're going to do, we're going to drop you down, and then we're going to just move the boat away. So there I was, floating in this sort of sea. And all I remember, it's so stupid. I just remember I was floating, and you know, you can see me looking terrified. I was actually terrified. Because I kept thinking, is there a shark? Is a shark going to get me? I mean, off the Isle of Wight. I mean, what is it going to be? Probably a dogfish or something. But but I just remember being really nervous, thinking I was going to get attacked by a shark, and I just remember floating and thinking, come on, hurry up, get this thing done. And then this boat comes in, and they lift me out to sea, and we did 2 or 3 takes. So that bit I do remember. And then all the stuff, like when they dragged me onto the main lifeboat, I remember all of that. I remember the actual dinghy, so they have a small one that rescued me from the sea. We rowed back into shore on that, and when they ride on those things, you have to get on your knees because they move really quick, and it's like being on a roller coaster ride because it moves really fast. It jumps over the waves, and it was like, I remember coming back. It was like I've been on a white knuckle ride. I was gripping for dear life not to come off this boat. But yeah, those are the things I remember. This wetsuit that I had underneath, so I was really constricted in my movements. But
I couldn't have done that. What you done in that floating out in the middle of the sea, you know. I had a terrible fear of sharks. Obviously Jaws. But I couldn't have done
but
that.
there was no. I mean, it
I
just.
know you know that, but I just.
And I think what he meant was there was probably tiny little baby sort of things on the show. You know, there's not going to be a 20-foot great white coming up.
You wouldn't need a bigger boat. No.
You know, and I'm floating in this sea, and the water's quite brown and murky because it's you know, it's the.
Yeah, no. I couldn't have
But anyway, it was that was
when he spoke to Helen then, and he sort of vowed that he was going to lay off the drink after that. But a couple of episodes later, you see him with cans in the school, and then you see him going into the off license. But all he's doing is he's trying to sell the cans back.
Yeah.
But that was also the year when Danny Kendall died, and Gonch had been on a sweepstake because Danny had been missing, and they had a sweepstake on when he would return. And when Danny Kendall died, Trevor tried to claim that he should win because he'd said next year, and he said next year's close to never, isn't it? So and he was just like, what are you doing? But we have to talk about that because we talked about the corpsing, and I know when the memorial scene was filmed, it's fairly obvious that quite a few of you are stifling laughs and jokes, and I know whose fault it was.
Yeah, so we were stood round this tree was being planted, and we're all there serious doing, and so it's all very serious and very somber, and then there's a moment of quiet as we're getting ready to shoot, just before we're about to say action, and then a certain character says something.
Did he have a different accent to you? Did he? Yeah,
I think he had a Scouse accent. Said something very quietly under his breath, which just, and I suppose actually it was quite, there was quite a lot of tension because it was quite a serious scene, and it probably helped to sort of ease the tension a bit, but it went too far, and then we all started sort of smirking and laughing. So there's a shot that they do where they sort of pan round. And everyone's like doing their serious, sad, and actually it looks really good. But I know when they're doing that, and I know from me because I sort of look down and look away and look up, and I know why I'm doing it because I'm trying to stifle a smirk. And I think we actually get away with it. But I just remember, and it was really bad because it wasn't fair on Gwyneth because Gwyneth was doing Gwyneth that was doing the little memorial speech?
It was Miss Booth.
There was a few different ones, yeah.
One of them was doing the little memorial speech. So they had the camera. They were doing the close up of them. So the camera was where we were in for eyeline, and so they're doing this long scene, and we're all sort of there, It wasn't great, but we just about got away with it. But, I mean, there's lots of little sort of things like that I think that happened. But yeah, George was very good at. He was very good at sort of cutting the tension, but sometimes he just went a bit too far.
No, there's another scene where it's the scene when Mr. Bronson had turned up without his wig on, and he delivers one of the greatest lines in Grange Hill history. Brilliant. And that was when they had the prom, and it was the first time a prom had ever been sort of mentioned, and Cleaver went with Helen, and he was dressed as
Rambo.
But Mauler was dressed as Rambo as well.
And then Mr.
Robson.
Mr. Robson, yeah. It's funny because I've just, as we've been talking, I've been thinking, I had quite, Stuart was there for years, the same as I was, and I'm thinking back now, I had quite a few scenes, like comedy scenes with Stuart. A lot of sort of scenes where I'd be trying to sort of get away with something, and I wouldn't get away with it because it'd be Mr. Robson. And it'd be those sort of like scenes where there'd be like, we'd say something and there'd be this knowing look. Mr. Robson would look at me and I'd look at him with this knowing look. There was quite a few scenes, and then that was another little storyline and a couple of scenes where we're running around and then suddenly Mr. Robson comes out as Rambo. The other Rambo. Was that the line? The other Rambo.
Yeah.
I've got to get the other Rambo. Yeah.
Brilliant. And now we move on then to the sixth form. And I think like sort of your storylines were a little bit diluted, or you'd have one storyline that sort of spread across the whole thing. And obviously like Ziggy had left, but Mike Bentley had come in, and you spent a lot of time with Rod, the caretaker, Pickles.
Wayne.
Yeah. And he was hustled out of money playing darts.
Was it poker as
There was darts at first, and then there was poker, there was all kinds going on. But the card school was good because it highlighted the gambling. Because Mauler got addicted, didn't he, and was like nicking stuff and just to pay for it.
I think at the time, as I said, I think the writers used to write stuff in that they may have heard about other people doing. So I think at the time, me and Jules, before George left, we started sort of having a few bets on the football and things like that. So they must have heard me talking about having bets on the football and things like that. And then they wrote that sort of thing in. Stuff would appear in a storyline, you'd think. They've been watching us. But what I remember about sixth form, because obviously we did 5 years, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I did lower six and upper six. I stayed for 7 series. I didn't want to go. They were trying to push me out the door again. But obviously, those last couple of years were different because the way that Grange Hill worked really was it always started with, you'd have a new first year intake coming, and you'd follow them for a couple of years, and then another first year intake. So you'd have the first year intake, and you'd have like the third year, and then you'd have the older kids. But this sixth form bit was probably like quite a new thing. And I remember Trev, and I think they were showing Trev sort of growing up a little bit. So there was a bit where I was working in a
Yes, that was the next year working at Travel. Now the travel agents had quite a Scouse connection, because John Burgess was the manager. He was in Brookside for quite a while, and the girl was she's got a bit of a Scouse twang to her accent as well, Elizabeth Ash. And Trevor actually made a sale on his first day. If you remember that one,
he was happy, wasn't he? And the first and last sale ever.
The manager wasn't happy because he hadn't checked the credit card list or whatever, but then just told him not to do it again. Basically, got away with that. But that was when Trevor and Ted also got into selling pizzas.
The bike.
Yeah, because there is that cracking scene, the first one where Ian, who plays Ted, sitting in the basket. It's like a sort of low budget E.T. If I'm completely honest,
because that's what happened. Because obviously Vince had gone and Ziggy had gone and gone. And
Robbie had gone.
So me and Ian, who played Ted, we stayed on. So we sort of, Trev and Ted became sort of pals. That was our little sort of.
But that was like the big storyline. There was obviously Ted and Chrissy and the pregnancy, and there was rumours flying around that Chrissy was pregnant, but she'd been seeing a teacher, and it was Trevor who told Ted, what a good mate. There you go.
That was like a sort of a callback to an earlier. So I think there was a storyline with Alison Bettel, wasn't there, where there was So there was a sort of a callback to that earlier storyline from years before.
There's a bit that year Trevor's parents were away, and Ted had told him, you need to have a party, and Trevor was like, I think I'm a bit old for doing that, so we decided to have a dinner party instead.
Cleaver's dinner party.
They invited Georgina and Callie, and he talked Sue in the pizza parlour to doing all the cooking for him, and he told her they were taking it for some old people. They were doing it not for like 2 young girls from the school, but there was a lad there called Don who was in it a little bit, and they asked him to cover for them at the pizza shop, at the pizza parlour. And when he ended up at Trevor's house, because Sue said, "Oh, where's the horse that had a sauce? She forgot to give you that." And then the girls realised then that Trevor and Ted hadn't actually cooked it. And the next scene, you see Ted trying to wash the horse that had a sauce out of Trevor's rather funky shirt, shall we say. As we say, Chrissy was pregnant, and Trevor and Ted had a conversation, and Trevor said that he wouldn't be offended if Ted wanted to call the baby Trevor.
Imagine it. No, for your friend.
And there was more work experience, and then he asked Carol to go to the dance with him, Carol from the travel agents, which was Mrs. McCluskey's leaving do. But it was also Trevor's final appearance as well. So how did you feel about having to leave?
I remember being quite sad actually, because it'd been a huge part of my life.
Yeah,
a huge part of my life. From sort of 13, 12, go back to my first appearance. So from sort of 11, 12 up until 19. So all through my teenage years, I was a teenager growing up and a teenager in Grange Hill as well. So it was quite sad and also a bit frightening, because it was like, right, got to go into the real world now. Because I think I'd been at, I left secondary school with no qualifications, even though we had tutoring and things like that. I never kept up with it. I just couldn't. So I was kind of on a path that acting was what I was going to do. Whether I was going to make a career of it or not, but it was the only thing I knew at the time. When I left Grange Hill, I was 19, and suddenly now I was out in the real world. Yeah. And it was quite a sort of a comfort blanket, really. Because I never had to go and audition or do anything. So for years I was just, I'd film a series, I'd have a little break and I'd come back and film another series. So I was earning a living and it was fine. So when I left Grange Hill, there was a sort of a combination of being sad to leave. Although it wasn't, the last couple of years were great. It wasn't quite the same because George had left and a lot of the other people that I started with had left. So it was different. But I was still very, still a bit of a wrench to go, and then suddenly now I've got to go out and be a jobbing actor, and I found that really difficult for a couple of years to sort of.
Did people just go, "Oh, it's Trevor Cleaver" when you walked in?
Like? I mean, I did all right. I mean, I went out and I got some jobs, and I worked on and off for about, I don't know, 10, 11 years. So I did okay, but I think what happened really was I realised in my early 20s that although I'd had a very good training from Scher, there was a lot of stuff that I hadn't worked at. So there were gaps in what I could do. And, so then, it's like, well, how do I sort of fill those gaps? And I wasn't the most driven, I've got to be honest, I was quite lazy. And I think in any career, any job, if you really want to be good at it, you've got to put the work in. And I knew other people, other actors, friends that I knew that worked really hard, that did additional training, did additional classes and things like that. And I knew I was going to have to go and do something like that. And I kind of sort of did bits and pieces, but I didn't really work at it. So when I got to sort of like 30, 31, and I left my agency. I was still at Scher Theatre. I was still going to classes there from time to time, and I was still on the agency there. And I had people that I trained with that went to Scher, had left, gone on and got another agency, because I think it was still seen as a sort of a children's type agency. And were doing really well, working, and I never left. And again, because the thought of leaving and going to get another agent and doing all that work, I just wasn't driven enough. I was a bit lazy, and when I got to that age, and then I left the agency suddenly decided that they weren't going to carry the adult actors anymore. So now it was like, well, I've got to go and get another agent. And at that point, I thought, I'm not sure I really want to do it. And my son, I had a son at the time he would have been about 8 years old. He lived in Swindon in Wiltshire. I was in London. I was travelling backwards and forwards to see him, and I just thought, I'm going to take a couple of years off. I'm going to go, and I moved up to Swindon and just went and got myself a job through an agency, working in a warehouse somewhere, and thought I'll take a couple of years off and just get a proper job and spend a bit of time seeing my son, and really that was it. I never went back to acting after that, and I don't regret it. I think it was probably the right thing to do, because you know, it takes a lot of work.
Yeah.
And also, you know, I've got to be really honest with myself. You know, I don't think, you know, I was okay. I got away with it a little bit, I think. But I met, there's a lot of other actors that I knew at the time and that I trained with, people I worked with on Grange Hill and people that I worked with on other jobs and people that I trained with at Scher that were much better actors than me and put a lot of work in. So, you know, I was lucky. I was lucky to have done something like Grange Hill for the amount of time I did it. It was a great experience. Lots of people had given their right arm to do it. But when I eventually stopped acting and went off and got a proper job, it was probably the right thing to do. And I don't have any regrets.
Do you still get recognised?
Not so much now. I used to, you know, for years and years afterwards. But it was really strange because what happens is you get recognised at the time, you get recognised for a few years afterwards. Then what happens is it stops or it quietens down. But then you start getting recognised by people the same age as me.
Yeah.
So people that would have been watching the show at the time, but they don't. What happens is people think they know you. They think they think they went to school with you.
Yeah.
That was what.
A lot of people say that.
People would say, "Did you go to school at so and so? Did you know?" And I never used to say. No, actually, I was in Grange. I used to say no, and then I would say things like, "Did you ever work for so and so company?" I would never ever reveal it because I always felt a bit uncomfortable, sort of saying that I was in Grange Hill. So I never did. But people would recognise me because they think they went to school with me or they worked with me. Because it'd be, you know, you get into your early 40s. I'd left Grange Hill when I was 9, so you're talking 20 odd years later. So people, they think they know you, but they can't quite place it. And sometimes people would say, they'd say to you, did you go to that school? So people would say things like, did you go to, you know, university at so and so?
I got a guy once say to me in a pub. He said, "Did you go to prison with me? Were we in the same? Did you share a cell with me in Walton?" No, mate, no, never been to prison. I could have swore I was in living in it together. I've had that one for.
It's things like that. Yeah. So people, but the last I don't know 3 or 4 years, I don't think it's ever. It's nice, you know. It's kind of funny, you know. So you know, it's kind of funny that 25 years after you left that show, that someone would.
I always say it's about the age of about 46 to about the age of 60. Anyone over or under, though.
Do you know that's the biggest demographic for the podcast?
Is it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. So that stands to reason.
I mean, you know, if you talk to someone now, say, I'm going to sound like some old fogey, but if you talk to someone now, say 24, 25 years old, then you know they'd have no idea what Grange Hill is. They wouldn't even know how, you know, because it was a prime time show, and it was a very good show. It was very well made. Yeah. They'd have no idea of it, but then the world is very different. They've grown up in a world with podcasts and with, you know, so their access to sort of drama and things
YouTube
is very different.
Well.
YouTube and everything.
Yeah, it's on YouTube, isn't it? So
so the world that they've grown up in is very, very different to the world that we. So when we were growing up, it was television. You know, I remember when Channel 4 started. It was like, you know, when Channel 4 first started, like, we've got another channel now. I mean, you could sit in a room now with television and flick through and find, you know, 200 different channels.
And there's new channels going on all the time, and you don't know.
So it's a very different world, and people being recognised for things or fame, if you like, celebrity is very different. Yeah. To what it was then. So you know, back then it was a weird thing to be walking down a street at 15 years old and someone recognise you.
At the time when it was like in its prime, I mean, you were like on the screen twice a week, was it?
Yeah.
Tuesday and Friday.
Yeah.
Say after I've been in a couple of years when everyone watched it, we had some close encounters, didn't we? When we go out, you know, we'd be in the wrong place at the wrong time, or I remember we had to escape nightclubs.
Yeah. So it was, so you got some attention. It wasn't particularly pleasant, but it was a very, it took a lot of getting used to.
Yeah.
Sort of being to sort of go out, or just to be out in the streets, be out in the shops, doing normal stuff. Waiting at a bus stop, and people would recognise you and come and talk to you, and it was a bit sort of an intense thing, and I didn't like it. I wasn't rude to people, but I just found it weird, and I think I was I realised very quickly that not to think too much about it. Some people love all that, and in the end you just get used to it, and you people come up and talk to you, because some people really love the show and they like watching it. So if they saw you, it was a big thing. So you just try and be as nice as you can. And once people got talking to you for 5 minutes, they realise that you just like them. And it was so. But if they left, if they walked off and they had a pleasant experience, and it wasn't, that was great. But it was really weird to think. But again, when you compare then to now, so people that have got YouTube channels and they've got like 10 million followers, and they've got 20 million followers, and they've got. I was just thinking about this the other day. A couple of years ago, I went to a charity football match in London at the Valley Charlton Athletic Football Club. 27,000 seat, all-seater stadium. And I took my youngest son, and he would have been about 14, 15, and it was to see a football match between sidemen and these YouTubers. And it was like they were playing each other, and there was 25,000 people in the stadium. It was packed, and it was huge. And I remember when we played in charity football matches during the time we were in Grange, we played in something called the Soaps Cup. It was a Goodison Park.
I remember that.
I think it was about 10,000 people there, which was
Neil was there.
I think it was about 10,000 people at Goodison Park, which was quite a bit. But there was a Grange Hill team, there was an EastEnders team, so a Coronation Street team. So, and the Coronation Street and EastEnders, 15, 16 million viewers at the time. So they were the biggest shows on television, and there was maybe 10, 12,000 people, which was a big thing. I went to this football match to see these YouTubers playing the sidemen, and there was 25,000 people in this stadium. It was packed. And it was huge. It was enormous, and it was streamlined on the internet, and they had I don't know, hundreds of millions of people watching it. And I just think that's on a scale that I can't. I think back to when we were doing Grange Hill.
Did you know any of them playing? Did you recognise any of them?
Some of them I know through my son, but it's not my. I'm in my 50s, so
it's a very different world, isn't it?
Well, I'm not going to sit here and go. I don't want to sound like some old bloke bemoaning. It was much better back then, because everybody thinks that things were great when they were younger, and sometimes your memories of your youth are sugar coated. Not great, but it's a very different world, and this is like fame and celebrity on a scale that is just hard to comprehend. And you think about what some of those people have to deal with. Where they're, when you've got people that are constantly walking around with an entourage. I mean, can you imagine? You having to walk around with an entourage. I mean, it'd be hilarious.
An entourage of women, John.
You just have like June and Joan with you to start.
Our entourage is chaperones, And that was the other thing as well. The good thing, that was the one good thing about being in that show, and having the families that we had, and having the chaperones. You couldn't get too big for your boots, because they'd pull you down a bit or two.
We had a guy. I used to, when I first moved to London, I lasted the 4 years with this family. Jeff, his name was Jeff and Dot. And this Jeff, he was a big influence on me and John in a lot of ways. John stayed every weekend, didn't you, really, more or less?
For about 2 years I was down. Jules lived in a place down in South London, in Mitcham. I used to come over near enough every other weekend, and we spent a lot of time there. And Jeff was a chaperone, and him and Dot, where George lived, they were great. So we spent a lot of time with them, and they'd grown up they were around in the end of the 60s and the 70s. So we spent a lot of time with them, and we talked about music and politics and things like that. So we never We had, that's what I'm saying, that they were very...
kept us grounded.
Kept us grounded, yeah.
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
So we were very lucky. So we had people in our family that kept us grounded. We had, you know, when we were working on Grange Hill, we had the chaperones that used to look after. They used to keep us grounded. Even when I used to go to, so I still used to occasionally go to classes when I was filming Grange Hill, Anna Shears, she kept us grounded. She was a very, very, very big on, you know, this is a place where you come and you train and you try and learn skills of acting. It's not about becoming star. So it was very grounded. So the fame, being recognised, was like a sort of a strange or weird thing that went on, but it didn't define who we were as we were as people.
You didn't have, like nowadays, I suppose you have like some kind of, you know, if we were working on a show like that now, I was 4 years, John was 6, was it?
Yeah, 6, 7 years, yeah.
So we didn't have, like you'd have it now, I guess, like counselling or supervision type thing, you know, where you can talk to somebody if you've got problems. We never had all that. We just had to, you know, started working out for ourselves.
Yeah. But you think what happens now? I think the thing that I see now, when you see footage on the news, or when you see stuff, if you look at stuff on the internet, and you see footage of people, you know, that are out shopping and they've got like people around them, and some people just live in it. The world they live in is not the real world. No. You know, we were fortunate. I think we were fortunate to an extent. We weren't living in this kind of, you know, where everything is done for us, and you know, we were still pretty grounded, ordinary. We were just teenagers. Yeah. It just so happened that twice a week we were on the television screen. But
it was a big thing for us. We just didn't think about it at the time how big it really was, did we? We just kind of got on with it.
And I suppose, you know, I know that, you know, some people probably had some difficulties after that, and during their adult life, some of your experiences can affect, you know, can affect your life. But I look back on it fondly, because the most important thing I take from being in Grange Hill, the most important thing I take from that is take away working as an actor, you know, being on television, all those kind of things, is I met George when I was 13, 14, and I'm now 50. I'm 53 in a couple of weeks, and so we're still friends. Yeah. So I've got someone that I've been friends with for nearly 40 years. Yeah. And there's other people that are on the show that I work with that I'm maybe not close with them, but I still have contact with them. Yeah. And I've got another couple of friends that I met through acting when I left Grange Hill, people that I train with that I've known for 25, 30 years. Yeah. So my son now, my youngest son, is 17, and he's got friends that he's been friends with through secondary school and primary school. And they're still friends now, and I'm hoping they'll stay friends when they leave school, when they get work, and when they get jobs and that kind of thing. They'll stay friends. That's the most important thing. I think that's, for me, a success. If you can turn around and say, I've still got 3 or 4 people that I'm friends with after 30 or 40 years, and I've seen, me and George we've seen each other go through a lot of things in our life, you know, all kinds of stuff, becoming parents. And George is now a grandparent. You know, he's a granddad. So and families and all the things that families go through, and losing family members and all those kind of experiences, and still be friends. That to me is the most important thing that I take from it. So it was great being on that show. I loved working on it. I was very privileged. I worked with some great people. I had a great time, and you know, I learned a lot about myself, and I learned a lot about life, and I had some great experiences, strange experiences, the laughter. But the fact that me and George are still friends now, we still laugh at, you know, we had sort of like little sort of private humour jokes that if anybody else heard it, they would think it was the most ridiculous. They wouldn't even find it funny. They'd think we was something wrong with us. But we still laugh at things like that, and we still every now and then we'll have a little memory of something from the most mundane, stupid thing from 20 years ago that we'll laugh about. And that's why I'm in Liverpool this weekend, because we still, you know, I still come and see him, and we're going to a gig tonight. We're going to see Squeeze. Yeah, brilliant. At the M&S Bank Arena, or the old Liverpool Echo Arena. So we're going there tonight, it's the 50th anniversary tour. That's how old.
I mean, I genuinely love the fact that you two are still mates, because I think I said it to you, George, that there's lads I went to school with, and they live around the corner from me, and I don't see them. Do you know what I mean? And like, you two are living at opposite ends of the country, and you're just still mates.
Yeah,
you know?
and but sometimes we don't, you know. So like, this is the first time I've seen George in person. I think last time was 2 years ago.
You come here, didn't you?
I come up 2 years ago, and then before that, I think it was a year or so before that. But we talk on the phone occasionally. Yeah. You know, we've got our WhatsApp, and you know, and so we'll occasionally send each other silly little messages. Yeah. And if stuff's happening, we'll have a phone call, and you know, you can do video calls now.
And on a slightly serious note, I remember, you know, when I went to hospital for the first time after Grange Hill when I was 21. You know, when I had my problems with with mental health, and I'll never forget that John, when he found out, I think my mum must have phoned him maybe, and he was on the first train from London to Liverpool to come and see me in the hospital, you know, and things like that.
Yeah.
You know.
I remember I was thinking about this the other day. So the road we're on now, George's house where we grew up in, is on this road. So if you go to the end of this road, there's a pub on the end of the road called the Halton Castle. And I remember when George was in hospital the first time, and he came out of hospital. He was about a week or so out of hospital, and I'd arranged to come up and see him again. And so I came up on the train. I think it was about 18, 19.
I was 21.
Yeah, so I'd have been about 19, 20. So I came up on the train and got the bus from town. We used to get buses then. And got the bus from town. I got off the bus just up the road from the Halton. I remember got off the bus, and I remember walking down, and George had arranged to meet me on the corner of the street. And as I walked down, I saw this sort of person standing on the corner. I thought, who's that? And he was a bit sort of edgy, on his toes, quite skinny, quite gum. And then I realised it was George, and I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
You know, I thought, God, you know. Yeah. And I didn't do a shocked look. I just walked up and carried on as normal, because I thought that was the best way to sort of just be normal. We started laughing and joking. But I remember seeing the first time he come out of the hospital, and that was a real shock. And I'd seen him a few more times after that as well, when he'd had his little breaks. But I'll tell you one last funny story, and I'll tell you this because I was thinking about this the other day. So when George lived in this street in his family home, they converted the attic.
Right.
Okay, so they converted the attic, and George had the attic room. And I remember one day I come up for the week, and this is a sort of stupid thing that we used to do, right? Which nobody finds funny, but we find hilarious. So one day I'm in the attic room, George goes downstairs to get something. So when you used to come up through the stairs, you used to come up, and as you came up, directly to the left was the bed. So George is coming back upstairs. So I thought, I know what would be a good idea. What I'll do is I'll do a moon. I'll moon. So as George comes through the hatch, all he can see is my backside, right? Because that's the sort of thing we used to do, right? So, and I can tell you, so George has done it a couple of times. I'll be in London on the tube. George would get off the tube, I'll be on the carriage, and as the train's pulling away, George would moon to the carriage. We used to do it all the time. I'm surprised you never got arrested. But that's a sort of stupid humour. So I thought that would be a really good idea. So this is back in the day, before mobile phones. This would have been the mid 80s, so I think it would have been about 14, 15. So before mobile phones. So I can hear George coming up the ladder. So just, obviously his head pops through, and then I hear him laughing because he sees me. So I'm on this bed, and I've got my head coming up, and I've got my head on the duvet, and I'm cracking up laughing, so funny. What I don't realise is there's a camera in the room. George gets a camera and takes a photograph, right? Fast forward 14 years later, George is in hospital in Liverpool, in the mental health unit, and I've talked to George on the phone, and he tells me that he's in this little room, and this room has got a little glass window. So as the doctors come round to do their rounds, each patient had their own little room with their little glass. They look through the glass, and then they come into the room to see George. So George, as part of his trying to make him feel all right, decides to put this photograph up in the window of this room. So these doctors are coming round. You imagine these doctors with this, all, you know, all in their coats, all coming around talking to the patients. This man in this room, yes, he's something. They come to George's and go to look in the glass, and on the glass is a picture of my white backside staring back at them. And I remember talking to him on the phone and telling me, I've put this picture up, and I said, you've got to take it down.
Brilliant.
So that's a funny little story.
Brilliant. Brilliant. So can I ask then? Obviously, you've said you moved away from acting. So what do you do now?
So when I moved up to Swindon, I obviously, because I left school with no qualifications, I didn't have any discernible skills or anything. So I started working for agencies. I started working in warehousing. So I started doing, just working in a warehouse as a pickup.
Strippergram.
Yeah, I don't think I do very well at that. So I did various jobs. I did a bit of couriering, driving vans, and all kinds of things. And then I got a job working in a distribution centre for Homebase. Right. I got there as a temp, and I thought, well, I'll do this for a bit until I decide what I want to do, until I sort of work out what I was going to do. I was thinking about going back to college and maybe trying to get some qualifications and thinking about what I was going to do. Anyway, I ended up staying there for 20 years. Wow. So I went in as picker, and then I obviously got more interested and worked my way up, got some various promotions, and eventually was a shift manager, and then was a sort of covered the ops manager role from time to time, and so eventually I sort of was managing shifts of 50, 60 people. So it was quite, so I did really well, considering I got as far as I could go doing that, and I love doing that. And that really, a lot of what I did when I was younger came in handy, because in those kind of situations, when you've got big teams of people, your job is not really about the job or the processes. It's about people, because you're dealing with groups of people. So you're dealing with all the day-to-day stuff. People not coming into work. People coming into work being frustrated. Some people being tired. Some people. So that's what you're doing. You're dealing with people. So you've got different sorts of people. So you've got different audience. You have to be a different type of person sometimes. So all of those things that you do when you're acting, it is like being an actor to an extent. Yeah. So I worked there for 20 years. But for the last 4 or 5 years I was there, I was wanting to do something different, and I'd always wanted to. I liked the idea of driving lorries, big lorries.
Oh, right, yeah.
And then as I got to the end, so I took redundancy at Homebase just over a year ago, and I started doing my HGV training, right. And I got my license in January this year. Yeah. But the difficulty when you're a new driver is getting a job, right, because you've got no experience. So I've just been doing some assessments at various companies, and I actually yesterday passed an assessment. So brilliant. I think in the next couple of weeks I'm going to be going out driving the lorry. And the reason why I wanted to do it, A, because I've always fancied doing it. B, I wanted a job where I was on my own. I quite like the idea. Yeah. I've been in an environment for years and years where I've been surrounded by lots and lots of people and lots of noise, and I've had enough of that. Yeah. I just want to get up, go to work, get in the lorry, get on the motorway, and drive for 3 or 4 hours. Have the radio on, have no one disturbing me. No, listen to a podcast while I'm driving, and I just want a bit of peace and quiet. So that's what I'm going to be doing for the next, hopefully, however many years. Brilliant. And then we'll see, and we'll see what happens. But I was very lucky, when I started working at my old job. I ended up being there for 20 years, and I got, I did quite well there, and I got married and had another son, and it's that lemon thing. Life is what happens to you making other plans. And I've still got friends that I have friends that are actors, and I'm still, other people tell me about stuff they're doing. I know quite a few actors who have done quite well, done quite a lot of work. So I like to sort of keep in touch with them and see how they're doing, because it still interests me. I still, like watching films, and I still like watching stuff on the television, and I still think like an actor to a certain extent when I watch stuff, but I haven't acted, apart from, I've said in my job where you actually sort of act sometimes. I haven't professionally acted for over 20 years. Wow. A long time ago.
Yeah. Well, We are sort of coming towards the end now, John. So I've just got the last few questions to ask you, and they are the same questions that I ask everyone at the end of every episode. So, over the last couple of years, there's been talk of a Grange Hill movie in the works with Phil Redmond writing it. What do you think of the idea of a Grange Hill movie?
Well, I suppose in my head I'm thinking, well, how would it work?
Yeah.
Because if you were going to do a movie about, you can't. Well, I suppose you could if you wanted to. You could set it in the 80s and do a sort of a retrospective look at and bring those characters back. But all the characters, you couldn't have Jules going back being Ziggy because he's not 15 anymore. Yeah. With the greatest respect to him. So I don't know how it would work. And if you were going to do a film about those characters and what's happening in their lives now, you'd have to sort of question, well, what's the relevance? Because there'd be people that would. If they went to see the film, they'd say, well, who are these characters? They don't know who they are. But Phil Redmond's a clever guy. He's a clever guy. So I'm sure that there might be a way of doing it. There'd have to be something to grab an audience. To go and watch something. And if it was going to be talking about characters that were, characters from something a long time ago. So I don't know how it would work, or whether it would just be Grange Hill would be a loose theme and it would be something different. I don't know. Yeah. So I couldn't really sort of comment.
But if you were asked, would we see a return of Trevor Cleaver?
Yeah, what's Trevor doing now? I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it depends. I mean, I have to sort of think, because my memory's not great. As you get older, your memory gets a bit worse. So I sort of think to myself, could I get a script and learn lines? If I went onto a film set or a set, it'd probably come back to me. Yeah. But could I deliver these lines? Could it be convincing? I'm not sure. Yeah. I've been asked. I was asked a couple of times to do things, and I over the years, like friends, actors that were making, doing short films or that sort of thing, and I've been asked to come back and do stuff, and I sort of said no, because as much as anything else, it's getting time off work and things like that, but also it's just a confidence thing. Could I do it? Imagine if I sat here now and someone gave me a script and said, "Oh, this is what we're doing, and these are your lines," and I don't know. I'm not sure if I could do it.
It's a bit alien to us.
It's a bit alien to me, but I'm sure. I mean, maybe I could pick it up, but I'm not sure I'd be. Yeah, I'm not sure I'd be the first person. I'm sure if Mr. Redmond is sitting there now writing a list of the people to contact, I don't think I'd be at the top of the list.
We just have to ad-lib it, son.
Yeah. Imagine a movie. It's a perfectly constructed movie with all this script, and then 20 minutes into the film, there's this 5 minutes in the film where there's stuff going on. No one knows. These two strange characters
calling each other fog inspectors.
Yeah, fog inspectors. Yeah. Sitting on tube trains and pretending not to know each other.
And then start mooning.
Brilliant.
Worst film ever.
No, you said you watched Grange Hill when you were a kid. Like, so, other than Trevor Cleaver, who was your favourite character in Grange Hill?
Oh, I couldn't say I had a favourite because I liked them all. I mean, I thought Ziggy was great. Ziggy, that year I thought was really particularly very good. Yeah. So I thought that Robbie and Ziggy was great. Gonch and Hollow, Ronnie and Callie, I thought they were all great. Fleur, Imelda was a great character. Steve, Vince Savage was a great character. I liked some of the older characters, like obviously Stu Pot. Gripper was a terrific character, and I mean, I remember one thing I do remember in one of the very first scripts that I had. There was a note in the script, so there was a description in the script of when Trevor first appeared, and it said Trevor Cleaver approaches as I think it said something like an embryonic Gripper. So this idea that Trevor was this sort of like young sort of Gripper character, but Cleaver was never like Gripper. Gripper was really quite serious, menacing. It was really quite nasty, and I always think he did a terrific job, playing that. That was a really strong character. But I couldn't pick a favourite. I mean, Zamo and Jonah, Faye, you know, there were so many great characters.
Todd Carty as well.
Todd Carty, yeah, I mean, Tucker, that goes without saying. So it would be very difficult, but, you know, I suppose I had a soft spot for the characters in my year, so probably Ziggy and Robbie and Gonch and Hollow, and the characters in my year I really liked. I thought they were great. And then also the group of characters that came up after us. So Tegs, like Sean was terrific. Grange Hill, absolutely terrific.
Could you tell he was going to do more?
I think because it was because he was so small, he was so tiny, he was so young, he was only like 11, 12 years old, but he had real personality, Sean. I think you could tell he was going to have a decent career. You know, he was so bubbly. But he's so different, you know, from that sort of 11, 12-year-old boy to when he got to 20, 21, it was such a change. I worked with him again. I worked with him when he was in EastEnders.
Oh, did you? Yeah.
I did an episode of EastEnders where he was with because he was Mandy's
Nicholas Staples,
his boyfriend. There was a scene in the laundrette where I played this. They robbed prescription pads from Dr. Leg Surgery, and I played this drug dealer that was coming in to buy them.
Do you know what your character was called?
Oh, I can't remember.
Your character was called Barry, which I think is a nice full circle there.
Right.
Because you were Barry in your first Grange Hill.
Yeah. So I remember working again, but yeah, I think he was very good in Grange Hill, and Rachel Roberts.
Yeah.
Justine was a great character. Chrissy. And the teachers.
There's so many, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, I've got to say, I had a real soft spot for George A. Cooper. I thought Mr. Griffiths was just the best.
Yeah, he was my favourite. Yeah.
He was so good, and Anna Quayle I thought was brilliant. There was a scene with Anna Quayle and John Pickard.
What
was his character?
Neil Simpson.
Yeah, and he was tiny. He was only a tiny little kid, wasn't he? And he was like 6 foot something, but there was a lovely scene between her and his character, I remember, and you watch him, and he was great, and she'd done so much work. She was a massive sort of actress, wasn't she? So I think probably if I was going to pick one, I'll
Cooper.
I'd say Mr. Griffiths. I think was.
But if you couldn't have played Cleaver, which other character would you have liked to have played?
Oh, that's a good question. Probably Gonch, I would have thought. The one that I originally...
The one you wanted,
well, the one I originally auditioning for.
Yeah.
Only because I thought he was... I wouldn't have... It would have been a very different Gonch to John Holmes' Gonch. John was terrific. But probably Gonch, I think.
Oakland.
I think he would... Because I think because of his character he was just involved in so much.
Yeah.
You know.
Brilliant. Okay then, so the final question, John, is why do you think there is still such affection for Grange Hill?
But I think because if you remember at the time, when it was in its height, it was like, you know, it had 8 million viewers.
And the rest,
So I think it was at a time when there was only television.
Yeah.
There weren't any other distractions. I think it was, again, I always say, I think it was really well written. Phil Redmond was a very clever guy. It was one of the first sort of shows of its kind. I think. It was very realistic. I think that because it had such a big audience and it was such a big show, the people that watched it loved it.
Yeah.
They really invested in it. You know, it was on twice a week. And it was on for a good few weeks. And I think the young kids that watched it loved it, and the older adults that watched it loved it. And I think it's one of them things that if you watched it a lot as a child and watched it a lot as a young person, it stayed with you.
Yeah.
And I think because today there's so much today.
Yeah.
That, you know, I mean, you know, it's like you watch. You know, I watched recently. A couple of years ago. I watched The Sopranos. I'd never watched it. Everyone told me it's great. You must watch it. Watch it. And I watched it, and I thought it was incredible. I loved it. Brilliant. But if you said to me now, tell me like bits in The Sopranos, I can't remember all of it.
Yeah.
Because I've watched so many different shows on Netflix. I've watched so many different things now that it's not sticking.
Yeah.
But I suppose when people were younger and they're watching Grange Hill, because there wasn't much else.
Yeah.
And people would watch it the repeats, so it kind of stuck in their mind. So it's like memories that they can access easily. Yeah. Whereas there's so much else, so much more going on now. Nothing sticks.
Yeah.
Nothing stays in your mind. So I think A, it was very well written. B, it was probably the only thing of its kind, and it was quite authentic, and I think people related to it, and so it sort of stays with you, doesn't it? It's like when you're growing up, you have a favourite band. Yeah. So, you know, whenever you hear a song by your favourite band, you know the words. Yeah. you know, or you know, I'm going to see Squeeze as a band I love. We're going to see Squeeze tonight, and they're in their late 60s. Yeah. You know, but we're still going to go and see them because they're a great band. Yeah. You know, so I don't. Yeah, I think it's probably that, and the obviously the characters, people related a lot to the characters. So I think that's probably, but they're all our age. Yeah. You know, they're all sort of in their 40s and 50s and 60s. So, you know, as I said, people in their 20s and 30s now have absolutely no. Can you imagine sitting someone down at, say, I don't know, 20 years old now and saying, watch 4 or 5 episodes of this show, tell me what you think? They'd probably watch it and think, what's going on here? Where's the mobile phones? Where's, you know, and the sets. Yeah. You know, the school sets. Yeah. You know, seeing the sets sometimes moving, you know, and the classrooms. And like looking at the classrooms, they're very different to what classrooms look like now. Wooden desks, and you know, the sort of stairwell that you see in the show. You see them coming down a stairwell, and then you see them going up a stairwell and coming down a stairwell from another. You think it's the same stairwell, a different part of the building. So, yeah, I think people just wouldn't. I think it's a nostalgic thing because people, you know, people look back and it reminds them of what it was like when they were growing up. So it's probably a lot of things, but it was very well written and well put together. Brilliant.
Yeah. Well, John, thank you so much for doing this. It's been great. It's been great talking to you. Obviously, your experiences and George. Thank you, George, for hosting us as well. Like,
I said I'd get him one day.
Yeah, you did. You did. He's been promising me for ages that you get on. But no, it's been great speaking to you and hearing your experiences and your time there. So
thank you. And I know this is going to be going out at Christmas. So Merry Christmas, everyone. Yeah. I hope a great Christmas, and I hope 2025 is a great year for everyone. So
brilliant.
Thank you. Thanks, Neil.
No worries. So happy Christmas, everyone. And to anyone that's listening, I'll speak to you next time. Cheers. Thanks. Bye-bye.